This is me 12 hours after acute back pain. I couldn't bend, sit, or sleep. And here's me squatting over 315 pounds pain-free. Here's exactly how I got here today. Looking back, I can see the perfect storm that led to my injury. Yes, I was squatting, but it wasn't the cause. I was in need of a deload week, not getting enough recovery. My nutrition that day was poor. I didn't have much sleep the night before. And I adjusted my training technique where I was trying to increase the range of motion and depth of the squats without changing any of the load associated with it. So looking back, yeah, I've ignored some of the small red flags, and then classic push through it led to an injury. This is what a lot of my first 48 hours looked like. I was not focused on fixing it. I was focused on surviving the acute phase because I was stuck in inflammation. This Z-lying position was really helpful for reducing the tension on my low back to provide a little bit of that pain relief. I would take Advil and Tylenol as directed just so I can get through and survive my days. And I would also work on gentle mobility exercises such as the cat-cow, working through a comfortable range of motion, and some lumbar rotations, working on some comfortable motion, never stretching or holding a position because that's what could lead to some more aggravation. Once I was out of that acute inflammatory phase into the subacute phase, I was able to tolerate a little bit more exercise that wouldn't provoke or flare up my symptoms. Some of these things were like single leg glute bridges, some planks, doing some air squats, and I was able to actually reverse lunge. So as long as I stay upright, I can reverse lunge. Started with those foundational movements to help get some activity, get some exercise back without provoking my symptoms. My rehab really started to take off at weeks 1 to 2 when I was able to start incorporating hinging-like movements to my routine. Now, I was still in the repair phase of tissue healing, so I knew things were still recovering, so I really tried to not overdo weights. I dramatically reduced all my weights, focused on endurance-based repetitions from 10 to 15, leaving 2 reps in the tank. Some of these hinging movements I was able to add were deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts, bent over barbell rows, and bent over supported dumbbell rows. I even started to dabble with a little bit of barbell squats, but we'll talk about this a bit later. These hinging movements were foundational to restore and gradually work on the comfort of the movement as opposed to loading. My final phase of recovery was the remodeling phase. After about 4 weeks of tissue healing, when the body was kind of remodeling everything, is when the progressive loading really started. So with those foundational hinge movements, I started to work more of that strength repetitions of 8 to 12 and started loading up the weights once I got to 12 reps, increase the weight by 5 to 10 pounds, go back to 8 reps, and repeat that cycle. This is when I started to make progress and getting back to all my regular routines of things. I was squatting at this time and working on 135 to 185. However, I will admit that my range of motion was compromised because this was the mechanism of injury. So my depth wasn't as great. In hindsight, there are some things I probably would have changed. My big setback came around 6 to 8 weeks post-injury when I developed bilateral gluteal tendinopathy. What that is, it's basically the tendons are degenerating at a rate faster than they're repairing right over the outsides of the hips, kind of that classic trochanteric bursitis pain. This was because the glute muscles were tight from the back pain and I was pushing them too hard. As much as I thought I was being gradual, I was pushing the squats way too fast, too soon. And in the end, I paid the price, where it took me 10 months to rehab the gluteal tendinopathy. At the 4 to 5, 6 month mark, I was getting pretty depressed with how much pain I was in on a daily basis. Luckily, my partner, she's a physio. She helped assess to see where my hip strength was at. And I had a lot of homework to do to work on that single leg loading, lots of banded hip abduction, trying to restore those functional movements. That progressive loading on the squats took a long time to get back to where it was. In hindsight, I should have just given myself an extra 1 to 2 months of just being so much slower and gradual, because when I pushed too fast, I led to a lot of pain. And after all that's said and done, I am back squatting more than 315 pounds, feeling more confident and intentional than ever. I'm pain-free, my depth is looking good, and I'm actually feeling stronger and pushing new progress. It goes to show that you can rehab from acute back pain and get back to where you were, if not better. The big lessons here is to be gradual. There's timelines of healing, and you need to go through each timeline of healing appropriately and not rush it. Be kind to yourself. Give your body the extra amount of time it needs to be fully recovered before moving on. Comment below if you've had any similar injuries, and follow for the next video series where I'm actually going to break down each timeline and the different exercises and modifications that you can make so that it's appropriate for your recovery.